Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, October 14th, 2024. All right, first thing, it is fundraising season at antiwar.com. If you read antiwar.com, if you watch or listen to this show, and you have the means, please go to antiwar.com/donate to see how you could help us out. We are 100% funded by our readers. This is how we get by. This is how we do what we do. We started the fundraiser last week. We're hoping we can get it done quickly so we could keep focusing on everything that's going on in the Middle East. We're moving along, not as quickly as we would like. So if you could help us out again, antiwar.com/donate. We're trying to raise $100,000. This is the first fundraiser we've done in about 5 or 6 months. We usually do them every quarter. And this money goes directly to funding the website, to basically paying the bills. So it's very efficient. We're nonprofit, so you could write it off your taxes. antiwar.com/donate. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. The U.S. deploys a THAAD missile system and troops to Israel. That is right. U.S. troops are on the way to Israel. So the Pentagon announced Sunday that the U.S. is deploying a terminal high altitude area defense, or THAAD, battery to Israel. And this is a very strong show of support for Israel. And look at what they've been doing. These attacks in Lebanon, more attacks on UN peacekeepers that we'll get into later, and the barbarity that we see in Gaza, in northern Gaza. It's still under siege. They're starting this ethnic cleansing plan. And here's the U.S.'s response. They're going to send missiles and troops to Israel, of course, putting a target on their back. So Pentagon spokesman Major General Pat Ryder said the deployment would include the associated crew of U.S. military personnel to operate the missile battery, which again it's an anti-ballistic missile system, missile defense system. A Pentagon official told CNN that about 100 U.S. troops will be going to Israel. Ryder said that the U.S. previously deployed a THAAD to Israel back in 2019 for military drills, and they also deployed one somewhere else in the region after October 7th last year. The new deployment comes as the U.S. and Israel are coordinating on Israel's plans to attack Iran, which they expect to provoke a new Iranian ballistic missile attack on Israeli territory. Ryder said, quote, "The THAAD battery will augment Israel's integrated air defense system. This action underscores the United States' ironclad commitment to the defense of Israel and to defend Americans in Israel from any further ballistic missile attacks by Iran. It is part of the broader adjustments the U.S. military has made in recent months to support the defense of Israel and protect Americans from attacks by Iran and Iranian-aligned militias," end quote. It's interesting that they throw Americans in there, that, we're going to be defending Americans in Israel as well. But, there's Americans in Lebanon, and they're not defending them. There's Americans in the West Bank. There's even Americans in Gaza. Iran fired nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel on October 1st in response to a string of Israeli escalations in the region, including the assassination of Hamas's political chief in Tehran. The U.S. helped intercept some Iranian missiles, but many did actually make an impact. Israel is planning to launch airstrikes against targets inside Iran, and the U.S. is expected to support the attack in some way, either by directly participating, which I think is less likely than the U.S. just giving intelligence support. But this is support for the attack. When you deploy a missile system to defend Israel from the reaction to its attack, you're supporting the offensive attack because you're promising to defend from whatever consequences there are from it. So no sign really when Israel's attack is going to happen, but this seems to be a piece that they moved into position to prepare for it. All right, so the next one here, the Israeli government seeks the annexation of Gaza. And if you listen to this show, that headline, might sound like old news, but this is Israeli officials speaking to Haaretz are coming out with it. They're saying, The government wants to annex Gaza. No more ceasefire talks. So Israeli defense officials told Haaretz on Sunday that the Israeli government is not seeking to revive ceasefire talks with Hamas and is now pushing for the gradual annexation of large portions of the Gaza Strip. The report came about a week after Israel ordered Palestinians living in northern Gaza to evacuate to areas south of the Netzarim corridor, a strip of land that's controlled by the Israeli military. So if they go south of there, they're not going to be able to go back north. With the evacuation order came a major escalation in Israeli military operations in the north, focused on the Jabalia refugee camp, which has been under a complete siege. So there was a report in Israeli media that basically confirmed that they are carrying out this general's plan, which is the name of this ethnic cleansing plan. It was drawn up by some retired IDF generals. This report said that Israel is carrying out a scaled down version of this plan. Basically, they don't want to go all out with it because they think they'll get pushback from the U.S. or from some other, just the international pressure might be too much. Obviously, the U.S., especially Biden, the administration right now, Israel could do whatever it wants, and they're not going to change anything. But it's saying that they're planning to do it a little slower than the plan outlines, but this is what they're doing. They're doing this general's plan, this ethnic cleansing plan. And essentially what this plan outlines is, order an evacuation of northern Gaza. Anyone who stays behind will be treated as a Hamas militant, even if they're civilians, which there's many civilians there, 300 to 400,000 estimated. So order the evacuation. After a certain amount of time, treat them all as Hamas, and that means imposing a starvation blockade and declaring the area a closed military zone, which means shoot anybody on sight. So the starvation siege seems to be already in place to some extent. The UN's World Food Program said on Saturday that no food aid has entered northern Gaza since October 1st. Israeli army commanders told Haaretz that the assault on northern Gaza was ordered without much preparation and that it appeared the primary purpose of the military operations was to pressure Palestinian residents to flee to the south. Again, more confirmation that the purpose of this is to cleanse northern Gaza of the Palestinians that are there. And many Palestinians have refused to leave northern Gaza since there's nowhere they can go where their safety can be guaranteed. Israel has bombed so-called safe zones repeatedly over the past year, and also these camps are overcrowded. The conditions are just horrific. And the Haaretz report said that Israeli troops were ordered to launch the assault on Jabalia, even though there was no intelligence to justify the move. Basically, that means there's no intelligence to justify, I guess, no intelligence saying that there's a lot of Hamas fighters there or something. It also says that some members of the Israeli security establishment did not support the operation, saying that it would endanger the lives of Israeli hostages. And if Israel is successful in cleansing northern Gaza of its Palestinian population, it would pave the way for the establishment of Jewish-only settlements in the area, an idea that is openly supported by many Israeli ministers and Knesset members. The general's plan calls for the tactics to be used in other parts of the Strip once the north is cleansed. So basically, they want to do this all the way down to Egypt. Man, it's just such a nightmare. The reports that we're seeing come out of Jabalia and the areas in the north, bodies everywhere, lots of people being shot and killed, even people who are trying to leave. They tell them to leave, and then they shoot at people who are trying to leave. Just a complete nightmare. But this is it. I mean, they're saying, obviously there's been no sign that Israel is interested in any kind of ceasefire talks right now. So that's obvious, but it's been obvious over the past year from the very beginning that this is the ultimate goal of the Israeli government is to conquer the Gaza Strip. And I think we're starting to see that play out more. They've already taken over parts of it with that buffer zone that they created around the border and this Netzarim corridor. In those areas, they demolished all the buildings, and they established military outposts. So it's been happening, but this is, they're really ramping it up now. All right, so the next one here, Israeli forces kill 52 Palestinians in Gaza over 24 hours. So As I'm recording this, there's horrific footage of people actually burning alive in tents. They're sheltering at the Al-Aqsa hospital in central Gaza. Israeli airstrikes hit them. People are burning. The casualties aren't clear. So that just happened. I guess that's early Monday in Gaza. So I don't have all the details on that yet, but this is just some details about the violence over the weekend in Gaza. Gaza's health ministry said Sunday that Israeli forces killed at least 52 Palestinians and injured 128 in the previous 24 hours, bringing its recorded death toll since last October to 42,227. As I always say, these numbers do not account for the Palestinians who are missing and presumed dead under the rubble or indirect deaths caused by the Israeli siege. In northern Gaza, it seems like that issue of not being able to get the bodies is even worse than usual. There's bodies on the streets that rescuers can't get to or else they'll get shot, according to these reports that we're seeing. And the health ministry put out an update on the situation in North Gaza that said, quote, "For the 9th consecutive day of the siege of the northern Gaza Strip, there are many wounded and martyrs in the streets and under the rubble. The ambulance crews are unable to retrieve them," end quote. So Gaza's media office said that at least 300 Palestinians have been killed in northern Gaza since Israel escalated attacks there and tightened the siege on the area, which is the beginning of this ethnic cleansing plan, as we just mentioned. So the Palestinian envoy to the UN described the situation in northern Gaza as a genocide within a genocide. And Israeli strikes on Sunday, they included an attack on the Al-Shati refugee camp in northern Gaza. According to the Palestinian news agency Wafa, an Israeli drone targeted a group of children playing near a cafe in Al-Shati, killing 5 of them and wounding several others. So children targeted while they were playing. This picture is someone carrying the body of one of these kids who was killed. So just another horrific strike by Israel. All right, so the next one here, Israeli tanks storm UN Peacekeeper base in Lebanon. This one is from Jason Ditz. As the Israeli invasion of Lebanon escalates, it has been reported that on Sunday morning, Israeli tanks smashed their way into a UN Peacekeeper base in southern Lebanon near Ramia. Reports from the ground are that 2 Merkava tanks forced their way in while the UNIFIL personnel were in shelters. They demanded that the base shut off all lights. They remained inside the compound for about 45 minutes and left after the UN filed a protest through liaisons. That wasn't the end of it either, as 2 hours after the Israeli tanks left, they fired an unidentified smoke munition just north of the UN position. The UNIFIL personnel were wearing gas masks, but 15 of them were still reported to have sustained skin irritation or gastrointestinal symptoms when the smoke reached their base. They are receiving medical treatment. So some sort of smoke munition, that could be white phosphorus, which is a chemical weapon. Under the laws of war, you can use it as like a smoke screen or something, but if you use it against people, it's a chemical weapon and it can burn skin to the bone. Could also be some sort of anti-riot gas or something like that. But this is what Israel's doing. They're attacking UN peacekeepers and gassing them. And this is in addition to around 5 UN peacekeepers who have been reported injured over the last week since the Israeli invasion of the area. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed that they are doing everything in their power to prevent UN injuries, but added to the demands that the UN immediately withdraw all their peacekeepers from this area. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strikes killed at least 51 in Lebanon on Saturday. So the Lebanese health ministry said that Israeli strikes in Lebanon on Saturday killed at least 51 people and wounded 174. The ministry said that since last October, Israel has killed 2,306 people and wounded 10,698 in Lebanon. The breakdown is not clear, but we know the Israeli bombing has killed many civilians, especially since they dramatically escalated things on September 23rd. Just in that one day, over 560 people died. The Lebanese health ministry said the majority, if not all of them, were civilians. There were many homes were targeted. Israel claimed that they were Of course, the claim is that they were storing Hezbollah weapons or something, but they provided no real evidence for those claims. So lots of houses bombed. And we've seen some of the stories of, whole families being wiped out in these strikes in Lebanon. Again, very similar to what's happening in Gaza. So late Saturday, one of the strikes on Saturday targeted an Ottoman-era market in the southern Lebanese city of Nabatea. And this market was established in 1910. The attack obliterated the area, with Lebanese civil defense officials saying they battled fires in 12 residential buildings and 40 shops in the market. You see this picture here, just completely destroyed. The Lebanese health ministry said that a total of 10 people were killed by Israeli airstrikes in Nabatea on Saturday. Elsewhere in southern Lebanon, 14 people were killed. In Mount Lebanon, an area that's to the north mountain range, kind of north and to the east of Beirut, at least 22 people were killed there. In the Biden administration, the U.S. has expressed strong public support for this offensive, for these strikes, for everything that Israel's doing in Lebanon, saying that they don't want a ceasefire. They want to use this as an opportunity to diminish Hezbollah's political wing. They don't want them in parliament anymore, and they think somehow this is going to lead to that. All right, so the next one here, Hezbollah drone strike kills at least 4 Israeli soldiers. This one is from Jason Ditz. Violence along the Israel-Lebanon border continues to grow. There's a Sunday evening drone strike hit an Israeli military site near the northern Israeli town of Bin Yamina. 4 Israeli soldiers were reported killed, and at least 61 people were wounded in the attack. According to the reports, 3 drones were launched at the area of Bin Yamina, which is in the Haifa district south of Haifa, the city. The drones were launched amid a flurry of Hezbollah rocket fire, and while the IDF intercepted 2 of the drones, the other one reached its target. So it looks like they tried to overwhelm the air defenses with the missiles and rockets, and then they fired these drones in. So there's a lot of people badly wounded. 4 were described as critical, but 4 Israeli soldiers confirmed dead so far, so it could be higher because they wounded a lot of Israeli soldiers, and some are critical. Hezbollah issued a statement confirming they were behind the drone strike, saying that it showed that they have a strong ability to resist Israel and can strike deep into Israeli territory. They added that the strike was retaliation for recent Israeli attacks on Beirut. Hezbollah and Israel have been trading strikes for over a year. He just gets into the background. Of course, things have really escalated in recent weeks, Israel's attacks on Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, Israel used a U.S.-supplied bomb in Beirut strike that killed 22. This article is from Brett Wilkins. So if you remember, I went over the story last week, the Israeli airstrikes on 2 residential buildings in central Beirut, outside of the area that they usually target in Beirut. And, you should kind of just assume that they're using U.S. bombs in all of these strikes because the U.S. gives them the vast majority of their bombs. But I still think it's good, when we have the evidence that these are American weapons being used. So at least 1 U.S.-supplied bomb was used by Israel in a Thursday night airstrike that killed at least 22 people and wounded over 115 more in the Lebanese capital city of Beirut, according to a Guardian analysis published on Friday. So it looked like experts concluded from the images and the pictures of the aftermath and of the shrapnel that it was a joint direct attack munition, a JDAM manufactured by Boeing. Human Rights Watch researcher told The Guardian, quote, "The bolt pattern, its position, and the shape of the remnant are consistent with the tail fin of a U.S.-made JDAM guidance kit for Mk-80 series airdrop munitions," end quote. So JDAMs are really, they turn dumb bombs into smart bombs. They're kits that they attach to bombs to make them precision guided. And this was a big airstrike in a very densely populated area. Again, just exactly what we see in Gaza, we're seeing play out in Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, Israel seizes UNRWA's headquarters for new settlements. So this one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So this is really something. Israel has seized the headquarters of the UN's Palestinian Relief Agency, UNRWA, which they're essentially at war with. They've killed over 100 of their staffers. They're accusing them of, all these ties to Hamas. So they are taking or they're about to take the land, take the building that UNRWA owns in East Jerusalem, in Israeli-occupied East Jerusalem. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to turn it into settlements. They're going to turn it into 1,500 new settlement units. So, I mean, when we talk about Israel and the U.S., the one thing that the Biden administration takes some action over is settlements. It's not really anything that's going to change anything, because they're still giving Israel all the other support. But they've sanctioned a few settlers. Because when it comes to the occupied territory in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the expansion of settlements, I mean, it's just so flagrantly against any kind of international law, basic property rights. They have these people under occupation who do not have any rights. And then you have the Israeli settlers come and kick them out of their houses. So because of that, you see the Biden administration kind of issue sanctions and stuff, even though they don't do anything. The sanctions don't actually do anything. But so just to kind of see Israel do this, it just shows how flagrantly they're just going to do whatever they want, taking the building and turning it into settlement units. So Saudi Arabia put out a statement that expressed the kingdom's, quote, condemnation and denunciation in the strongest terms the Israeli occupation authorities' decision to seize the land on which the UNRWA headquarters is located in occupied Jerusalem and turn it into a settlement outpost, end quote. So another sign that Biden's pipe dream, or I should say Brett McGurk's dream of Israel-Saudi normalization is not going to happen, at least anytime soon. All right, so the next one here. Oh, so I posted, so if you guys kept an eye on the channel over the weekend, you saw I posted an interview with Kagum Balian. He's a Jerusalemite Armenian who lives in the Old City in the Armenian Quarter. So I just posted the interview in the news section here. And we spoke about the pressure that they're facing from an Israeli real estate company and Israeli settlers who are ultimately backed by the Israeli police. In this ancient community, the Armenian Quarter dates back to the 4th century. That's when the first Armenian Christian pilgrims started showing up in Jerusalem. So go watch that if you didn't. It's on this channel, or if you listen to the podcast, you'll see it. It's the last episode if you haven't seen it already. Seems like a lot of people liked it. I'm happy to get some attention on this issue. And Kagum is a representative for Save the Ark, which is Save the Armenian Quarter. It's a movement. They're trying to raise money for their legal defense against this real estate company, and just get more attention on the issue. So go check that out. The next one here, Israel releases U.S. journalist pending probe. This one is from the Gray Zone. So Jeremy Lafredo, the Gray Zone journalist, an American who was arrested, I went over last week. He was released on Friday. Actually, I believe it was on Friday, from Israeli jail, but he has been prohibited from leaving the country. So it's been confirmed, and I think I went over this in the last episode, that he was arrested for that report on the Iranian missile strikes inside Israel. So one thing that kind of upended the case against him was that there was a journalist for Ynet, which is the Israeli news site, who testified that he had an article containing Jeremy's report. It was embedded in it. And that got past Israel's military censors. So if that got past the censors, then how could they get Jeremy for doing that report? But it looks like they might still try to get him because they're not letting him leave the country. I haven't seen, I didn't really look, but I still haven't seen any word from the State Department, from the U.S. government about this case. But a lot of people, it's gotten a lot of attention, from outside of the mainstream media and everything. So hopefully he's able to come home. I mean, he's a very brave journalist. He's been doing a lot of great on-the-ground reporting. He did a great report, actually, from the Armenian Quarter, which was one thing that inspired me to interview Kagum. But he's done a lot of good stuff. So definitely go check out Jeremy's on-the-ground reports that he's done for the Gray Zone. But hopefully he can get home. If he wants to come home, I would assume that he does. I don't really know the situation, but hopefully they don't try to throw him in jail again. All right, so the next one here, U.S. veteran arrested by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. So this article is from Middle East Eye. A United States military veteran was arrested by Israeli forces while accompanying a Palestinian farmer in a village in the West Bank, according to the International Solidarity Movement, ISM. Michael Jacobson was in the Palestinian village of Masafar Yatta in the Hebron Governorate when he and other activists, as well as the Palestinian landowners, were approached by Israeli soldiers on Thursday morning. The ISM said the farmer Jacobson was facing daily harassment, attacks, and invasions of his private land by Israeli settlers and occupation forces. The soldiers demanded their identification, and later Israeli police were called, who arrested Jacobson and took him into custody at an interrogation center. So police told the U.S. citizen's lawyer that Jacobson was endangering the public due to provocation of disturbances and accused him of entering the country illegally because they suspected him of supporting the Palestinian-led boycott, sanctions, and divestment movement. He was threatened with imprisonment and deportation if he did not leave the country immediately, according to the ISM, and he chose instead to leave for Jordan, so he left. So he got out of there. But this is, we saw this with Agi, the Turkish-American woman who was killed. She was American. She was born in Turkey, but she moved to the U.S. at a very young age. This was the group, the International Solidarity Movement, that she was with when she was shot and killed by the Israeli forces. Aishanor, I blanked on her name there, Aishanor Agi. And again, this isn't a Palestinian farmer who's facing pressure and attacks by Israeli settlers. So the activists go and accompany them, and then they get arrested as well. All right, so the last story here, the U.S. bombs multiple ISIS camps in Syria. On Saturday, U.S. Central Command said its forces launched airstrikes against multiple ISIS camps in Syria a day earlier. CENTCOM said in a press release, quote, U.S. Central Command forces conducted a series of airstrikes against multiple known ISIS camps in Syria in the early morning of October 11th, end quote. The command did not offer any details about the strikes, saying that its battle damage assessments are underway. CENTCOM claimed that there was no indication of civilian casualties. We know the Pentagon has a history of lying or hiding civilian casualties. In Syria, ISIS doesn't control any significant territory in Syria anymore, but it does seem like there's been a little resurgence over the past year. And of course, that's all the instability in the region because of what's happened with Israel and the U.S. bombing the Shia militias and the rocket. It's just such a mess. But what's kind of funny is that you have the U.S. occupying eastern Syria. The Syrian government and its allies are enemies of ISIS. They don't want the U.S. there to be bombing ISIS. And then in Iraq, the Iraqi government also doesn't want the U.S. there. They say that they can handle ISIS by themselves. But we've seen the U.S. increase military operations against these ISIS remnants that are kind of relegated out to the rural areas of Iraq and Syria. And then speaking of Iraq, they recently came out with this big plan to end the U.S.-led ISIS coalition there, but the U.S. is going to stay in some other capacity, just change the name of what they're doing. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Jonathan Cook. Israel wants to finish the job Washington started after 9/11. One from Jim Fitzgerald. Israel against itself and Israel against all. One from Gideon Levy. Israel has lost its humanity as it celebrates its power to kill. One from Siraj Asi. The U.S.'s long history of destabilizing Iran. And our spotlights from Ted Snyder, how Blinken turned diplomatic corps into a wing of the military. So please go check all of that out. And again, help us out with our fundraiser. Go check out our blog. I just did Kyle Anzalone's show, Conflicts of Interest. I also did Kelly Vlahos' show with Kyle. Definitely go check that out. Her show, Trip the Beltway Fantastic. Had a nice conversation with them. I was all on the Scott Horton show recently too, so I did kind of a marathon of shows last week. So go check all that out. I will be, if you want to support the show, if you don't have the means to help us out with our fundraiser, you could always share this show, tell your friends about antiwar.com, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff helps out. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.